Time to do that February reading wrap-up, starting with 2-star reads. Wanted Bonds by Eunice Amnell. So this book was poorly written and what I would probably consider like a standard werewolf shifter romance. I put the book down because it seemed like our main character was a messy high school child. It seems like there was going to be a betrayal between her and her best friend, and I'm just not here for girls fighting each other just for messy ass conflict, especially if they're fighting each other over a boy. Bringing me into The Werewoman and Her Witch by Aunt Georgia Lee. This is a high 2, low 3-star sort of read that I'm regrettably rounding down on. There is definite characters and style here. I'm not opposed to reading another book from this author, but there was just like way too much going on and not enough connected elements. It ended up coming off as a little bit random and weird for my taste, but there is a foundation in there of something that could have been fun. Next is Coven of Sorrow by Melody Lynch. This is part of the Trinity Jones series, and I thought I was going to roll through these last 2 books and finally get to finishing off this series and moving on with my life. I dropped it 2 years back. The series had left me on such a low point, I didn't really want to keep going. And picking this one up, I found myself right back at the lowest of low points. That's not really what I liked about Trinity Jones. And I just found myself like struggling to get through this. It was actually stopping me from reading new things, so I decided to just admit to myself that I'm done with this series. And you know, whatever was good in it in the first book and a little bit in the second book, I just am not going to find again within this particular venue, and I'll have to look elsewhere. Also, sidebar, but can we see that like this is such a pretty cover and they changed it to this? The natural hair, the facial features in this original cover is just so much nicer than what we did over here. Although I will give this cover credit because the fit is looking really good on her. Moving me into 3-star read. Thirsty by Jenna. This is a sapphic sports romance book. Major content warnings in it because both these characters have extreme baggage and just trauma dump all over the page. And all that stuff like just is magically healed by the power of insta-love. I enjoyed this read in like a self-insert crack fic kind of level. But if you're not here for it to get like really kooky and wild, I don't know that you're going to be into this book. There were also some sweet and compelling moments within the couple relationship building element of the story. It didn't 100% work for me, but there were individual instances where I was like all melty for them. Next is When She Returned by Lucinda. I read this book as part of the Unhinged book club over on Fable, and I'm gonna be honest, this is a book I probably would have DNF'd if I hadn't been listening to it. It's a story that's told by jumping back and forth in time and using those time jumps as a way to maintain the mystery, and it's also told in multiple perspectives, which I think is lazy. Like, if you actually have a compelling, interesting story, you could tell it in a straightforward manner. The fact that you had to sort of like hide the reveal from me in this way shows me that you don't really have something worth saying. The characters in the story are frustrating, and except for the 15-year-old child, everybody here really sucks. And I especially feel bad for this 15-year-old because it seems like all the adults around her are using her in some capacity, except for maybe her father. For me, this story really drove home the all cops are bad kind of narrative. Like, we're starting with a missing woman and the cops are like doing a bad job trying to find her. And then we have like the good FBI agent who they come to trust and see as a member of a family. And what he does to this family is like unforgivable. The fact that he can do such a thing without like alerting the dad or warning the daughter or something like that really hits home to the fact that like people who are in this profession seem to be profoundly fucked up. That this was not an ethical line that he should not have crossed. I don't know, I don't have words to describe my disgust for that plot beat or for the fact that this is probably something that happens, probably is even textbook. This woman needed a divorce, but instead she decided to join a cult? Okay, I guess. As far as like the cult stuff, which is the majority of the book, like both thriller-wise and horror-wise, it's kind of mid-tier. It's a thing. I don't know that it's that good a thing though. There's a really annoying dangling plot thread where in the back in time parts, Kate is talking to her best friend about how not everything is okay in her marriage. She's kind of like bored and frustrated, and then she lies and says it's fine. When we come to find out that best friend stops being friend with the husband when Kate disappears, probably because she suspects him of something nefarious, and they suggest that that they get back in touch with that best friend for Kate's sake, so she has like another anchor point outside of the cult. The husband says that's a good idea, and then they never follow up on that idea, and that whole loop there really frustrates me, because how interesting would it have been to have the best friend come, say hello to Kate, spark up those kind of memories of a life before and what it was like outside of the cult, hear that person's perspective on how things are different with the Kate she knew and this Kate. I feel like that friend might have been able to identify some things for us that the husband is blind to and the daughter can't possibly know because she barely remembers her mom. I don't know, I think the combo of potential this could have opened up in the story, combined with the fact that it was mentioned and never executed on, frustrates me at like such a high level. I cannot get over it. And I think about this missed opportunity more than I think about any individual detail of stuff that actually happened in the plot. Beyond that, I found like an overwhelming amount of similarities between this Lucinda Berry story and other Lucinda Berry stories I had read. The parallels between this and Appetite for Innocence I feel like should be pretty obvious, but there's also a lot of connection between this and Off the Deep End. Part of it makes me want to not ever read anything by Lucinda Berry again because I feel like she's a one-trick pony, and part of me is so fascinated I want to read her whole back catalog and then do a deep dive on how all of them are kind of the same story with the same twist. Which moves me into Veiled Threats by Melissa Erin Jackson. This is a paranormal urban fantasy that I just uncomplicatedly had a good time with. It doesn't quite roll into 4 stars, but I feel like it sets up a series that could be a really great one. The basic idea is that Camilla Fletcher and her husband run a detective agency together. They are mundane, fully human people who know about a secret supernatural end, and they end up doing some jobs for the supernatural. It also incorporates them into like the Collective, which apparently is a supernatural government hierarchy, and doing some jobs for them or being loosely affiliated with them. I just think both the relationship and the detective work here is good. It's very well balanced. Next is Rapture and Ruin by Fortuna Lux, who's going by Memo Rabble for this one. This was fine. It was overwrought. It was melodramatic. There were parts of it that were fun. Overall, I don't think it quite pulls it off, but it doesn't pull it off in such a way that's pretty traditional for these kind of stories and just leaves it at like a low mid-tier. That rolls me into Scum of the Earth by Erica Hart and Chenille Richmond. This is kind of close to a 4-star, but also not at the same time. The book is sort of broken into 2 halves. Like, the first part, she's abducted by these men who are about to do horrible things to her, and she like turns the tables on them. And that's fun. And the second part is like a combination of like hostel, strippers, underground sex clubs, and like the satanic panic all rolled together into like one kind of mess. And I think if we had just stuck to the first half, this probably would have been pretty good. The second half is trying to be really extreme, gory, shocking. I don't think it necessarily executes on that as well as it thinks it does, but I think part of that is because it's not really telling a larger story, where like in the first half, we get a little story about each one of these bad men's origin, and I like that because it's kind of like a little anthology woven together, and then we get a little backstory about Melody, and that like contributes too. Also, I kind of like Melody. I like that she's so angry. I like that she is mentally like tearing people apart while superficially sort of smiling and going about her day to day. Like that sort of internal rage is very compelling to me, and the way that she like is not like the others helps her find a way to like escape and survive all of these men who are about to do terrible things to her is great. We all love a little bit of revenge. In like an extreme horror situation, we sort of like when there's a setup where we try to see who is the worst of the worst and who gets to have their victory or whatever. I just think like the back end with the strippers setting up like kill rooms and stuff like that is not as much fun. It's kind of stereotypical and rote. The violence in it got to be kind of repetitive and almost annoying. Like, yeah, I see you're trying to shock me. I see you're trying to make this so terrible, but I mean, you've done the worst you can do already. You can't continue to top from that. And it's completely divorced from emotion because there's like this one lady who's abducting all the people for the like victims in the rooms, and then like they're just killing and torturing strangers. Where in the front half, where we get all of these different men's backstories, some of them were like doing horrible things to people that they knew. and like love, and I found that to be like more insidious, compelling, more creepy, more message heavy than like, yeah, some people are just horrible people and can do horrible things to strangers. Next is Consumed by Rianne. The story itself is a bit predictable and standard, but the progression of events combined with the ending is going to have me thinking about whether or not this was an inevitable conclusion for our characters or if they could have made different choices along the way and done something else. Also, I think Burt does a great job making Cambry a fully fleshed out person. I don't know, there were just little touches here and there, little moments of Cambry thinking or reflecting that made me think this is a real person and not just like a character we're moving about the stage. She was a realistic person who was the perfect person to go on this journey with. Which rolls me into Experiments in Love by Rianne. This is a very low 3-star, bordering on 2. I think the fact that the writing is fine and the original premise of there being mutants and them doing like scientific DNA mark testing to try and figure out why or the how of mutants was good. The extreme turn into urban fantasy, some of the plot beats that happen here, not so great. They were not great in ways that I personally found unforgivable. I think a different person would have just found this sort of like a standard flawed urban fantasy. Rolling me into 4 stars, Bloom by Delilah S. Dawson. I read this as part of the Weirdo Book Club, and as of recording I haven't gone to the book club meeting, which I intend to go to, and I'm really curious to get some more thoughts and takes on this. I am glad I read this book, but I'm also pretty disappointed by it. This one is one of BookTube darlings. I hear nothing but great rave reviews from people, and all of them have been really spoiler free, which I will attempt to try to do in this review as well. It is a sapphic romance that turns into a horror novel, and that's all I'll say about the plot. I am going to do a more detailed full spoiler review of this because I have a lot of things to say. That's pretty much what I found out when I was scripting this video. The reason it's here at 4 stars is because I loved the first 2/3 of this story, and things like kind of end up retroactively not working for me because of the back third. But like, Dawson has an amazing writing style. I really liked the characters Ro and Ash. I love the way they orbited each other. I love the way their relationship was described. I loved like those first relationship jitters, those nerves, those like appeasing, not appeasing kind of moments. I could really identify with both characters at certain points. And I knew it was a sapphic romance turned horror. So there was part of me that was like making predictions about how that would happen, and I was enjoying the potentiality there, even though one option is significantly more obvious than the other. And in that regard, in the horror turn, I just don't feel like the author made the right choices. And I was sort of bored by that portion of it. I don't know, it's a low 4, high 3. I rounded it into 4 stars because I liked so much of this novel for so long, and I'm not going to let the ending sour things for me. Rolling me into 5-star reads, Trail of Lightning by Rebeca Roanhorse. Roanhorse, again, is one of those like big name booktube author darlings that you hear a lot about. Right now her Black Sun series is the one that gets like the majority of the videos, and that's because it just concluded last year. She's been on my backlist for the longest time, and I finally got an opportunity to pick up Trail of Lightning, and I have 0 regrets. Everything I thought I was going to love about this story is there. Like, the summary 100% delivers on what's proposed. The fact you're in a dystopian apocalyptic world, the fact that we have a badass, hard-boiled female main lead character, the fact that there's something supernatural or paranormal going on, there's like magic in this universe and powers and all this cool stuff. There's just so much to explore and to like and to be rooting for here. I really loved it. I think if any of those elements appeal to you, you would really like this story. And this is what I would consider like a new adult story, not necessarily a young adult story. And for me, the difference here isn't just our main character's age, but where she is in life. So like, a young adult story to me is dealing with like those high school themes the first time you're approaching something, and a new adult story is sort of like for that second wave where supposedly you're ready to be out on your own and the real world, and you're trying to take the advice or information or training that you've gotten from mentors and parents and guardians and like apply it, and you're sort of discovering that some of the things that your parents told you no longer apply or is valid, and same thing for like your mentors and stuff. So like things they could have done back in their day when they were your age is just not true anymore. Stuff that they thought was a bad idea might be a good idea or might be neutral, and you're sort of like trying to parse what advice to take, what habits they taught you were good habits or breaking things that were bad habits, or like starting your own new tradition and figuring out what all of that means for you out in the world. To me, that's like a new adult literature thing. And this is definitely a story where our main character has just been abandoned by their mentor slash potential romantic interest and is trying to figure out what that means for them, like in their isolated islands or surrounded by different communities where they don't quite fit. And that's going to be everything I read this past February. Talk to me in those comments down below. Tell me your favorite February read. And if you've got this far and you've got nothing else to say, leave me either a lightning bolt emoji or a flower emoji in those comments down below. And as always, keep reading.